Our question focus for this lesson is, how should I begin my narrative? In this lesson, you will learn how to create 3 separate leads for narratives by using action, dialogue, and thinking. Well, by now you should have selected a seed idea from your writer's notebook that you'd previously written over the last couple of weeks. And you should have begun writing a first draft by copying from your writer's notebook onto a loose leaf sheet of paper. We will achieve today's objective in 3 steps. First, we will learn the 3 different possible leads. Second, we will write the same scene using each of the different leads. And third, we will choose the lead that best fits the narrative we wish to write. Well, our first step is to learn the 3 possible leads for narratives, so let's do that. The first is an action lead, and it has the main character doing something. So this is going to start with action verbs somewhere in the first sentence. The second type of lead is a dialogue lead, and this has characters speaking. And this is going to start with dialogue between characters. The third type of lead we'll look at today is the thinking lead, which has a character thinking. And so this starts with the main character thinking something. So let's practice with the first type, the action lead. Remember, this has the main character doing something. So we're going to read a passage together. We'll read it written from each of these 3 different ways. So obviously the first one we'll read is from the action beginning. I gulped my milk, pushed away from the table, and bolted out of the kitchen, slamming the broken screen door behind me. I ran down to our dock as fast as my legs could carry me. My feet pounded on the old wood, hurrying me towards my dad's voice. "Scott!" he bellowed again. "Coming, Dad!" I gasped. I couldn't see him yet, just the sails of the sailboats that had already put out into the lake for the day. So I'm going to stop and ask myself a question. Are there any action words here? Well, let's see. I have gulped, pushed, bolted, slamming, ran, pounded, hurrying, bellowed, gassed. Well, I'm not that great at math, but I see 8 action words that we've highlighted here in just these 2 paragraphs. I would say this is an action beginning. Look at the different endings that we have here on the words. We have ed and ing endings around this page, and so those are clues for how to create action in your narrative. And so now it's our turn. I want you to look back at your seed idea from yesterday and your very first part of that draft, and I want you to think about if it's action already or how to make it an action beginning. So I'm going to give us 3 minutes here to look at the beginning that we've written and rewrite it using action verbs. All right? It's going to take some time to do this, so you'll need to hit pause in the video to give yourself the time to complete the exercise. Just remember to hit play when you're ready to continue. All right, so now it's time to have the same beginning, but with dialogue, which is again with characters speaking. We'll look back at our example between Scott and his dad, and just remember this is the same beginning that we just read, only with dialogue instead of action at the beginning. "Scott, get down here on the double!" Dad bellowed. His voice sounded far away. "Dad?" I hollered. "Where are you?" I squinted through the screen door but couldn't see him. "I'm on the dock. Move it! You're not going to believe this," he replied. Well, it sounds a little different, but it also sounds a little like the same. So let's see if there is any dialogue in this passage here. Well, I have this line. "Scott, get down here on the double." "Dad? Where are you?" "I'm on the dock. Move it. You're not going to believe this." Right, so yes, there is dialogue here, and I can know this because I have phrases and words in quotation marks, which is the first clue that dialogue is happening in the story. Remember again, this is the same scene that we just wrote with an action beginning, or that we just read with an action beginning, and so it's not the continuation of the story, it's the same beginning again. And so I'm going to ask you to do the same thing, to start your story with dialogue now instead of action. Again, it's the same scene you just wrote, but with dialogue as the start. The first thing we should see are quotation marks and somebody talking to somebody else. To give yourself the time to do this, remember that you'll need to pause the video, take the time to write this new beginning, and then when you're ready to move on, hit play. Well, let's look at our third type of lead, thinking, which is where a character is thinking, right? And so this is starting the story thinking. Not to beat a dead horse, but this is the same beginning, not a continuation of the story we're reading about Scott and his dad. The author here has rewritten it with thinking as the start. Let's read it again. I couldn't imagine why my father was hollering for me at 7 in the morning. I thought fast about what I might have done to get him so riled. Had he found out about the way I talked to my mother the night before, when we got to camp and she asked me to unpack the car? Did he discover the fishing reel I broke last week? Before I could consider a third possibility, Dad's voice shattered my thoughts. Scott, move it! You're not going to believe this! Well, we have to ask ourselves a question. Is there thinking in this paragraph? The answer is yes, right? So here are some 3 clue words, imagine, thought, and thoughts, that tell us that Scott is thinking something. And then here in blue is a whole section where he's actually thinking without having to say he's thinking. He's questioning in his mind why his dad might be yelling so early in the morning for him. So definitely there's thinking going on here. By now you figured out the pattern, right? I want you to look back at your narrative, and I want you to rewrite the same beginning, but now I want you to start with thinking. So take 3 minutes to look at your beginning that you've already written and rewrite it using thinking. Again, you're going to have to pause the video to give yourself the time to do this, but when you're ready to move on, please hit play. The last step that we have to do is to choose the lead that best fits the narrative we wish to write. All right, so now you have 3 different beginnings. You have an action beginning, a dialogue beginning, and a thinking beginning. And you have to make the decision as the author, which is the best beginning for the story you want to tell. Right, so not all stories need the same beginning. We have a choice here, and now is the time for you to choose. We've achieved our objective in today's lesson in 3 steps. First, we learned the 3 different possible leads. Second, we wrote the same scene using each of those leads. And then third, we chose the lead that best fits our narrative. In this lesson, you have learned how to create 3 separate leads for your narrative by using action, dialogue, and thinking.